A to the K.
A to the K.
A to the K. Hello, welcome to the A2theK Wrestling Show for our unique segment this week, What If? And this time we are focusing on what if the streak didn't end in the way that it did? What if it didn't end at all? What if it ended sooner? What if it ended later?
Almost a few what ifs with this, because it has like a few different areas, like you say, because we could have gone, what if the streak never ended? But that would have been a very short what if. Or what if the streak ended differently? That has got many different arms to it. It's like we're watching the what if series itself that Marvel do, because what this could just branch off to different realities constantly. But there are a few key points that we want to talk about, and I think, Carl, sorry to sort of railroad in, but I do that. Sorry. I think the first point of call. Shall we talk briefly about the current situation?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, Undertaker's streak ended by the infamous Brock Lesnar. Now, this was shocking in itself. I think we can both agree that neither of us expected that. The audience, one of the few times at wrestling that I've just heard like a pin drop in an arena.
It was deathly silent,
one
wasn't it?
saw that. That was crazy. And in terms of legitimacy, he's definitely someone who could have ended the streak. But let's talk about the current situation in the sense of, do you think that was the right use of the streak? The streak having such a legacy behind it. Do you think Brock taking it was the right use?
It's such a weird one for me, this, because, as you said, from a legitimacy standpoint, he's Brock fucking Lesnar, so of course it makes sense. The problem I had with it was the build was so shit for this match. I didn't even give it a second thought that Brock even had a chance.
It hit you so hard, because it's like, you don't expect it, because no one really put a lot of stock into it being a big build at all, like you say.
But it was like he couldn't have been less intimidating at that point in time, Brock, than what he was. It was just kind of a last minute thing thrown together where everyone was like, oh, he's come back for his WrestleMania payday to lose against the Undertaker, blah blah blah. So I think, yeah, to your point, maybe that heightened the shock factor. But at the same time, he could have still built Brock up as a credible threat, and I think everybody still would have gone, the streak's still not ending, it'll never end. And then be like, I can't believe it did, and then it would have made more sense. So it's kind of it's a 50-50 thing with me, because Brock is absolutely the kind of guy you can respect ending the Undertaker streak, but I think they could have done it with him being even more of a monster. And you can't really argue against what it's done for Brock either, because obviously he was already a megastar, but since ending the Undertaker streak, he's like, S tier status in the WWE, isn't he? Like he is. He's only gone on to win more and more.
Do you think he would have got... Do you think, let's say we go to a scenario, which is where I'll touch on next, that initially we'll say that Brock doesn't end the streak. Do you think Brock would still be an S tier now?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because he came back, and as I said, he wasn't exactly being pushed as this megastar. Like when he came back, didn't he lose to Triple H?
I think you may be right there.
At one point and stuff, he came back and it was just like, Brock's back and yay, you know what I mean? So it was just really out of left field. So it was after this and the whole Paul Heyman thing where it was like, Brock is the 1 in 21 and 1 or whatever it was. That again became like almost a relaunching pad for Brock. So I think he probably still would have ended up getting to S tier, but I think this massively helped.
Yeah, and like you say, it puts him in that status that like, I think it became more acceptable when Brock was rocking up and just ruining people. Yeah. And it was like unrealistic that people could take him out because he was this phenomenon at that point. He's the guy who could end the streak. So I'll take your point. I mean, I know they obviously subsequently had Roman do the same thing, but whatever. So yeah, I take your point on that. So let's if we start delving. I'll go with the one that probably has the least sort of talking points, but we'll cover it. So I want to firstly discuss, Carl, what if WWE chose never to end the streak?
See, I don't know. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I imagine that's what you would have been your ideal scenario, is that he would have retired undefeated.
I do have a personal choice that we'll talk about as we get later on in the show of if the streak ended, who I would have liked to have seen it go to. And answer may surprise you because I'm not a particular fan of this wrestler, but I was a massive fan of the feud itself.
It sounds like one of those articles you see or whatever on the site.
Well,
And this
doctors hate this secret.
number 6 will shock you, and it's like, yeah, you clickbaity motherfucker.
So the end may surprise you all. Now, so for me, I'm like, the ideal Undertaker, favorite wrestler of all time, and in some senses, I'm like, yeah, the streak built up such a legacy that it should never have ended. But then, is that the most satisfying scenario? Like, even when we talk about it, what if, like, streak never ended, Undertaker finishes, and that's that. You know, he's retired now. No one's ever going to end the streak. Happy days.
Yeah.
But the same way, is that something that you protect because of Undertaker's legacy? You know, I wouldn't have been upset if they did that. But I think at the same time, there's always that thing, wasn't it? Like, I don't think he'd have ever been able to retire with the streak intact. Because I think there would always been that. Well, is Undertaker going to come back? Is he going to come back for Mania? Are we going to get another addition to the streak, or you know, someone? I think that question would have always been in the air: is someone going to end the streak? Is someone going to end the streak? I don't think he'd have ever been able to retire.
No,
without the question.
I think he certainly wouldn't have been able to retire and be like Mark Calloway, like he is now, like doing interviews and shit like that. Because as weird as that sounds, but like I just think that when he became human almost on that day where this streak has ended, and that's when it started to be like this. He's been beaten before, and then okay, he is now kind of Mark Calloway and stuff like that, and he's old now.
He was able to sort of start stepping away. I know he only truly stepped away from the Undertaker in his match with AJ, which I think was, I want to say 2 or 3 matches later, because we had Bray Wyatt the subsequent year in which he won, then we had Roman who beat him, so they ended up becoming the 2 in 21 or whatever. So I know he had a few matches still as the Undertaker, but like you say, he started to step away from the character at that point, and then truly stepped away when he became the American Badass again to beat the shit out of AJ Styles, which was awesome. No offense, AJ, but you both sold that cinematic as well, was really fun. But yeah, I mean, part of me thinks, the right thing to do was to end the streak in some way, but at the same time, like, in respect to the Undertaker, I could totally have got on board with them going, no, we're not going to end it. I can imagine that no one ever would have let it go.
Yeah,
I've just been like, oh, he's going to come back. We're going to have a WrestleMania with it. He'd have been in the 70s and people still be going, is he going to come back? And we, and then you're like, just let it go, guys.
I definitely think it should have ended eventually. Like I don't like the fact that it ended and then he got beat again. Like for me, the ideal of the streak, which we might come on to later on in this, is it should have been completely protected up until his final retirement match, and then he loses. It becomes like he massively puts over someone, and then that's it. Then he's gone.
I think it hasn't been too damaging to Brock, but I think that's the irony that, like, it doesn't affect the Undertaker, it affects Brock. Like, Brock being the one man who could do it was affected by Roman doing it as well.
Yeah.
Which is ironic that they've not brought that up in the current feud between the two of them. The two men who could beat the Undertaker at Mania are now feuding. Interesting.
Well, I think if their feud now, because of what happened and it didn't get, we didn't get it day one, if that now goes to Mania, maybe we might see it then as part of that feud potentially. I think they'd be silly if they didn't, because they are literally the only two people in the world who have done that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is a hell of an accolade to have. But I agree with you. I think it should have, not necessarily have been Brock, but it was Brock, and Brock was the one to end the streak. I don't think anyone should have beat him after that.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, to be honest, if I had it done completely poetically, I don't think Undertaker should have had a Mania match after that either. But
exactly,
we would have lost out on specifically the AJ Styles thing, which was awesome. So it's difficult, isn't it? Because you go, well, the streak's ended, you never do a Mania again, is a bit of an ask, but at the same time, it would have been a more poetic way of ending the streak. Like that's when he stopped doing Manias,
Yeah, he definitely didn't have. For me, that is when his WrestleMania ended, really, because after that match, obviously the Bray one was fine. The Roman one, he wasn't in the best physical shape.
No, he was so.
And then we had like the John Cena. Was it John Cena after that? Like he had that little random thing with John Cena.
He ruined Cena. That was over so quick.
Yeah,
I totally forgot about it. Yeah, he ruined Cena. Yeah,
but like that was brilliant, and the AJ Styles one was brilliant. But for me, his last kind of proper match. I mean, it's probably Bray Wyatt, but the one I think of was the Brock one. To be fair, so for me, his WrestleMania did end that day, really.
Yeah. I totally forgot about the Cena one. that was over so quick. That was awesome.
It was so good that though. I loved it where he was just sat in the audience and it was like, well, obviously he's going to get the match, and then it's just when it happened and he got obliterated, it was just like, holy shit.
I think because everyone's used to like Cena just winning things, it was so refreshing. And fair play to them. That was brilliant the way they executed that. So, yeah, I don't think there's a lot of talking we can do on what if the streak never ended, because if it never ended, sound poetically that would have been nice, but it did. So here we are. Now, I want to talk about an option that was heavily a couple of options that were heavily suggested. The first one I'll talk about that seemed very likely, and I think people were surprised that it didn't, was CM Punk. So CM Punk being the huge commodity he was at the time, I think a lot of people expected that he might be the man to end the streak. Mm-hmm. So let's delve quickly into what if Punk could have done it?
I'm glad it wasn't.
I am. I don't think it would have actually done much for Punk or the summer of Punk or what Punk was at the time. And looking at obviously what happened, I mean, let's delve into a what if scenario in the sense of if Punk could have been the one to end the streak, and that is a huge accolade for Mania, not a main event at Mania, but a huge accolade for Mania. Would that have changed his perception with WWE at the time? Would that have made him stay potentially?
I mean, that in itself is a huge what if, isn't it? Because obviously, even now in his current feud with MJF, MJF keeps bringing it up that like he's never main evented a WrestleMania, he's never been there, and you know that kind of moment and stuff like that. And you know, while him and Undertaker wasn't a main event, if he would have, you know,
that would have stole the show.
Yeah, like if he would have beat him in that, would that have then catapulted him into the main event? Because you know you'd have to basically, he's the guy who beat the streak, therefore you know, would he get the same effect that Brock Lesnar had? Therefore, he would be a main eventer by default and stay there.
And let's face it, like Punk could have propelled that into something magnetic just in sheer promos. Being he wouldn't have been a 1 in 21-1, but being the one who did it, that would have made for such good sort of mic work that, like you say, they could have propelled him into a main event Mania scenario for the following year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely could have done. Which then does raise that question. You know, if he would have finally got his Mania main event, would he have stayed? What would the landscape have been like then without Punk being gone for 7 years? I imagine there would have been a lot of difference.
Oh, it would have changed WWE for fundamentally in a lot of ways. We'd have still had the rise of Roman, because that was like WWE were big on him before Punk even left. Would have made probably more feuds between Punk and Roman, and maybe had Roman put over a lot sooner as well, like properly put over, rather than us all hating him while WWE like love him. You know, it could have changed a lot of feuds in that sense, which would have been interesting.
I mean, obviously with Punk being like the leader of the Shield, or you know, or whatever at one point at least, sort of, you know, we could have got the likes of a Moxley feud with him. In WWE, we could have got Seth Rollins, you know, and stuff as well, like feuding with him, as well as Roman. So those could have been interesting things.
Not to try and be too wild with it, but if there had been options for like feuds with Punk, that might have not soured Dean Ambrose either. Dean Ambrose might not have been saddled with gimmicks that he weren't overly thrilled with, because he was involved in heavier feuds with the likes of Punk, and therefore we may have kept Dean as well.
Yeah. Which obviously one of the big catalysts for AEW. So
there you go. If Punk could have won and ended the streak, AEW would never have happened.
it's such a massive reach, isn't it? But I mean, you never know.
I had to go for that reach. Obviously,
butterfly effect and all that.
Pivotal for AEW was Omega, Jericho, the Bucks, and the like. So that there was always happened. I was joking with that one, really, but. I don't know. Personally, as you say, I think as much as like that could have had a great effect on WWE, it wouldn't have affected Punk's sort of status in the company. And I wouldn't have been a big fan of Punk taking the win of it, to be honest with you.
No.
Especially at the time, because I didn't like Punk at the time, I'll be honest with you.
No. And I think as well, knowing what we know is the fact that he left, I think it would have been really upsetting for the person who ended the Undertaker's streak, would have been someone who just then left the business.
I know, yeah. If it carried on and that would have happened, then yeah, it would have been a strange thing. Because you know WWE's approach to things as well. It would have been like, let's not talk about it, and they probably would have immediately had someone else beat the Undertaker so that they could concentrate on that rather than Punk, because Punk left,
and they would have all been for nothing. You know what I mean?
So. Yeah. So, Calm, Again, because we have a few different scenarios, so we have to be relatively brief on them all, unlike our other what ifs. I want to talk about, and something I always thought that they potentially should have done with the streak was to use it to build up a new up and comer.
Yeah.
So we talk. There's a few different options that we can maybe discuss on, and I not really an up and comer at the time, but like I think they could have executed the Bray Wyatt stuff sooner when Bray was getting his rise. They could have done the Bray Wyatt Mania match sooner, and used that to propel Bray. But one thing that I wanted to talk about in a bit more depth was something that you actually told me that I didn't realize, and that was the fact that Wade Barrett was always apparently destined to be the one who ended the streak and propel his career with it. So, shall we talk about the possibility of up and comers, but specifically, what would have happened if Wade Barrett had have been sort of carried on with that scenario and they actually pulled the trigger on that?
I mean, it's always felt like absolutely criminal that Wade Barrett, it went the way that it did for him. Because obviously, for someone who showed so much promise and potential, and not just because he's a Brit as well, but like
we tend to have a bias, but yeah, you're right.
A little bit. But like even when he was in NXT, like he really stood out. And then when he went on to do the Nexus stuff and things like that, you could tell that he was he had the potential to be a star. He had the size, he had the look, he had the mic work. Obviously, the Bad News Barrett stuff. He had the charisma. It's crazy that it never really took off for him. But I think I'm not sure whether it was Undertaker had kind of almost handpicked him, or whether it was like a mix between like, oh, this is going to be the guy, and then Undertaker was like, okay, yeah, we'll go ahead with it. But for whatever reason, it never ended up coming to fruition. But from what I hear,
to him, if you think you're going to streak, we've got some bad news. Sorry,
he's like, no, we like this better. Yeah, that's going to be your gimmick now. But no, I think that in itself, like at the time, because I agree, it would have been. That's how. And we'll get onto this when we talk about who we would have liked to being the ones to end the streak if it wasn't Brock, for example. But like for me, that's how it should have always been done. Like I said, where like it should have been to really catapult some up and comer into the fucking stratosphere with okay, you beat the Undertaker.
Like, he's the perfect example of that as well. Like he come in as a hot commodity with the whole Nexus thing, and he was definitely like destined to be a future champ, but he needed something to propel him, especially in a solo sense, in a champion sense. And this would have been the thing, wouldn't it? This would have been the perfect execution, really.
Because like the thing is, a win over the Undertaker at WrestleMania, being the only person to ever do that, that sets you up then for the rest of your career, because you've always got that feather in your cap. There's not going to be anyone else who goes one other person, but no one else goes and does that. You know what I mean? Like you're literally the 1 in 21 and 1 or whatever it was. So that would have been his go-to material that put him to that main event status. So it absolutely could have worked. But yeah, I suppose in hindsight, knowing what we know with obviously whether it was a result of this or what of it not going ahead, but he ended up getting the King Barrett stuff and the Bad News Barrett stuff, and then ultimately just getting released out of nowhere. Yeah. Rotten to the core, that's what they were.
It's crazy though, because like it is criminal. Like he never got, like he should have been in the main event scene. He should have been a world title holder multiple times. Really speaking, he had the look, he had the mic skills, he had everything. And like you say, I'm not saying it's about the fact he was British, Carl, but like look at our roster so far. We've got the likes of Pete Dunne, Wade Barrett, William Regal, Davey Boy Smith. We've got a good track record of having superstars that are Brits. I'm just saying. And I think everyone I listed there has not been world champions.
Nope.
That probably didn't help. Anyway.
I mean, Drew can be British when...
He can be. Yeah, we'll have Drew. He's Scottish at the minute, though, isn't he?
Yeah, that's a little in-joke that with Scottish people, obviously, like Andy Murray and stuff like that in tennis. If he loses, he's Scottish. If he wins, he's British, so we can milk it.
That's what we do. But yeah, I think Wade Barrett would have been almost the perfect option, and it is almost a travesty that he didn't. But let's say like we go for the what if scenario that he did. Surely the next step for him, he's ended the streak. He's like the only one to do it. This would have put him in to the main event scene surely straight away.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, massively.
So naturally, he'd have ended up in the crosshairs of John Cena at some point in his life. But this is where the what if gets a bit difficult. I think he would have held the title well, and he'd have had a good run with it. But his run with the title would have determined any future title runs, I suppose, wouldn't it? So let's pitch. Who would you? He's ended the streak. He goes into the title scene. Who would you put him up against?
I mean, what year is it we're talking about here? Around about what time he would have?
Because, like, let's say it's Barrett coming up from the Nexus, so he's sort of already had. I mean, you could rebuild the Nexus scenario, I suppose, and say, well, because John Cena kind of fucked the Nexus up, not deliberately, but like the whole tearing through the Nexus the way he didn't really help their credibility. So let's say he ends the streak and he's going up against John. I don't know if he was the champ at the time because it was a while ago, but let's say we put him in the crosshairs of John Cena going forward. So we could have had a legitimate feud with him and John, but actually Wade takes the win on it and is the world champion. So let's say he's on top, he's still a heel, he's beat the Undertaker, he's beat Golden Boy John. Where would you go from there?
I mean, at that time, the only other people who were still around then, so you had the likes of Orton and Batista and people like that. So I imagine there would have been a Randy Orton program in there at some point. But yeah, I mean, it would have been difficult because he would have won it as a heel at that time, where they were kind of starved for baby faces and stuff, weren't they? So it was.
I mean, you could turn it. You could have him win as a heel because it's all the Nexus connection if you put it around the Nexus time, and then you could have had him turn face against Punk, who took over the Nexus.
True. Or you could have done the turn as part of the match, so he manages to beat him fair and square, and then Undertaker gives him the seal of approval, thus making him a face. You know what I mean? It's like that respect thing.
And you could have had the Nexus maybe turn on him with Punk at the heels.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know how big Wade Barrett is. I'm sure he's like 6'6", 6'7", something like that. He's a big dude, so he's not quite like Undertaker 6'10", but like
build. He's not actually 6'10", but he's builder.
Yeah, because I'm wondering whether or not like that could have been like the passing of the torch of the big men almost, because he always came across as a big man.
6'5".
Okay,
Wade Barrett. 6'5".
I was an inch or so. It's an inch or so out. You know.
Yeah. Always exaggerating an inch.
Like to embellish sometimes, but yeah. So I don't know. There could have been something around that, basically in terms of the big man aspect. But interestingly, and only because you mentioned it, then what if John Cena would have like broken the streak early in not early in Cena's rise, but like when he was, kind of peak Cena, like spinner belt time kind of thing, when he was really Cena getting legitimized, like what, like,
I mean, it's difficult, this one, because with hindsight we know that Cena didn't need it to propel himself to the superstar he is, but I suppose it would have got him to that point quicker and maybe soured everyone quicker. We might have got a heel run out of him.
I was going to say, yeah, like would that have really actually rubbed the fans completely the wrong way, and so basically made him a de facto heel.
Yeah, and they pulled the trigger on him on another heel run, which a lot of people really wanted and still kind of never got. I know he's a little bit of the bad guy when it comes to his Bray Wyatt match, but he still kind of never really had a heel run. So other than his initial one, so that would have been cool. I'm also intrigued while we're talking about it is the scenarios we're given. Wade Barrett and John Cena would have been the streak ending a lot earlier. So because I've mentioned before that I would like for that to have been Undertaker's last WrestleMania match. That probably wouldn't have been the case. So what would that have meant for Undertaker going forward? The streak's ended.
That's a very good point.
Sooner. What was it mean? Like, would he still have the same connection with WrestleMania? Would he then start taking losses at WrestleMania, or would you protect it and have him carry on winning and start a new streak in a sense? But the only ones who ever take him out was Barrett or Cena in those two scenarios. Like, because would people have started that again if he has a Mania match after that and wins? Does that start the streak again? Or is it start of a new streak? I don't know.
Well, that's it. It kind of kills it, doesn't it? Because someone else who very much could have ended Undertaker's streak, when you think about it, is Randy Orton, the Legend Killer.
I mean, in some ways, his whole gimmick was poetically set for that, wasn't it?
Yeah, like he literally could have killed the streak. Like it was written for him to do that, but obviously it never happened. But that's another one who I probably would have been okay with him ending it, but it's easy to say that now because if you do factor in, well, that would have been much earlier on. What would that have meant for Taker? I don't know. You know what I mean? And I suppose another person as well potentially is Kane.
I don't think I've ever been too settled. I get why you'd pick that, but I don't think I'd have ever been too settled with Kane doing it.
No, I think it's more from like the poetic side of thing of like you know them of what they've come up through together and stuff like that. I think Undertaker at one point went on record to say that if anyone's going to end it, he'd want it to be Kane. But
knowing the way WWE tend to book things, if Kane had done it, he'd have like took over Undertaker's mantle and probably started his own streak for a few years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I could feel that they do that. Be like, it's my streak now, and he'd like start then winning at WrestleManias. Probably not for as long, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, he'd literally lose the next one. Well, that wasn't much of a streak.
Well, that wasn't as easy as it was. It's crazy. The streak is so legendary, but like if you look at the matches in it, not to digress a little, like there's some really shit matches in there. In all honesty, still a win. Still a win in the books.
Some absolutely awful matches.
Let's talk about the Nathan Jones match. We tagged with Nathan Jones, who didn't turn up until the last 30 seconds and done a spinny kick, which totally. It still pisses me off. Like massive guy and he does like spin kicks. It's like that does not suit you at all.
I mean, classic WWE. I think they basically just went, oh yeah, this guy looks big. Well, yeah, we'll team with the Undertaker. Yeah, we'll put him in a match. Oh, actually, he can't wrestle. Shit. You can't really put him out there because he can't do anything. Well, let's just lay him out beforehand then. Oh, okay.
It's crazy. Like Undertaker defended the streak against like I can't even remember who his tag team partner was now, but I know Albert was one of his opponents in that tag match, and it was a handicap match because Nathan Jones weren't there, and he's got a tank like Albert and someone else whose name escapes me, and he fucking still won.
That you just reminded me then because it's in that match. It's one of my favorite WrestleMania moments. Is he tries to give the last ride, I think it is, or the tombstone to Albert. I think he was A-Train, wasn't he, at the time? And he can't lift him up; he's too heavy. So you can just hear him really loudly go, "Help me!" to to Albert. It's just like as if to say, like, shift your weight or something so that I can somehow not fall over. He's about to fucking drop him. So yeah, that's pretty funny.
It's funny though. So yeah, I mean, there's like a myriad of options, but so far, I would think Wade Barrett would be the most solid option for like an up and comer. Because you could list as many up and comers as you like in a lot of senses, but I think Wade Barrett would have been the best shout for like a new star being made from it.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah, I think so. I think again we potentially run into the fact it would have ended slightly too soon. Is the only thing with it. Because obviously, if we would have preferred after he lost for that to be it, then we wouldn't want that to be it so soon, would we? So that's the only thing.
Yeah. So if we move on, then Carl, to personal choices.
Okay.
And I'll do mine first, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
And you already know this, but let's talk on it. My personal choice would have been Shawn Michaels. And not a fan of Shawn as a person, or a wrestler, or a human. But but the feud between Undertaker and Shawn was done so beautifully that it almost felt right that he did it. And I don't think he should have done it in his first match. I think he should have done it in his second. Okay. Because it was like, because of the way that whole thing was like one big story told, wasn't it? Because he tried, he failed. I believe we had Triple H the following year, and Triple H failed. And then Shawn couldn't settle with the fact that he couldn't do it, so he had to break the streak, and we try again. And still didn't do it, I believe, is the way it went. Either way, we had 2 matches between the two. Yeah. And I would have done it on the second match, and I would have had him actually do it and managed to end the streak. But that's purely because I was engulfed in the story, in the way they put it together, in I know it's a bit cheesy now, but even in like the heaven and hell, the way they did it, because Shawn's found God again and Undertaker's the big red demon or whatever. Big evil, sorry. I combined Undertaker and Kane. It's a travesty.
I like that, the big red demon.
So even that was done. Like, it might feel a little cheesy in today's world, but even that was done perfectly because of just the two personas just kind of worked. And even, do you remember Shawn dressing up basically as a entirely white version of the Undertaker?
Yeah,
Well,
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Obviously,
yeah.
the
And
theme in it and
you
stuff.
hate Shawn, so that's brilliant. You saying that?
No, it was literally like light and dark, wasn't it? Like obviously him coming
Yeah,
down from the heavens, him coming up from hell. I loved it from a thematic standpoint. I thought
yeah.
it was so well done.
But yeah, I will be honest, and we can try and do this as a what if. But the only problem I've got with it is it wouldn't have done anything for Shawn.
No,
What would you have done with Shawn?
was
Because Shawn was getting towards the end of his career anyway. What would you have done with Shawn with that?
was the second match Shawn's retirement match? Did he wrestle again after that, or was that it?
The trouble is, I don't think he's ever officially been back. So I think you're right, but I always take the retirement matches with a pinch of salt. It's like when Ric Flair retired, and fucked that up too. But I think you're right. I think he's done a couple of spots here and there, but I don't think he's actually been back in anything.
Oh well, he had the Saudi match, didn't he, which was a fucking train wreck actually.
See,
So
you get
he has
shit
had a
like that,
match.
but if you don't
But
count those random cash grabs, yeah, he did retire, I suppose. But and that's obviously that was the aim. That's what they wanted to do, and they wanted to
yeah,
end Shawn, not end the Undertaker at that point. But and that's where it's difficult to do. Like, oh yeah, Shawn's ended the streak, and that ends the streak with it using absolutely no momentum at all. But in a way, it still would have been a really nice way of doing it because I was so engulfed in the. That's probably been the best storytelling for an Undertaker Mania match, as far as
yeah,
I'm concerned, and that's some of the reason that it would have been my personal choice to see Shawn actually end the streak because that would have been a beautiful way for it to go out.
mm,
Um, but it wouldn't have done anything for like furthering any careers or anything like that. It had just ended.
no.
You know what I mean?
I think if they went that route with it, it would have had to have been both of their retirements at the same time.
Okay, how
And
good would that have been?
you know what I mean?
Shawn can retire knowing that he managed to end the streak, and Undertaker can retire because the streak's ended. It would have worked so well as well. They could have even ended as friends, couldn't they? Shook each other's hands and just
yeah,
retired. That would have been
yeah,
awesome. In a way.
exactly. So something like that could have worked. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe they then both ascend to the heavens, or he basically goes, "Nah, you're coming down to hell with me," and it's just Shawn crying.
No, not like this.
The last moment we ever see. Where you belong, bitch. That's for Montreal. I'd love it. But yeah, something like that could have absolutely worked. I think. To be fair, it's mad though, and I don't want to digress slightly. So I think I was just thinking back then when you were saying it. So I think what happened was it was back to back. So Shawn had lost the first one, and then it was his redemption the following year. So it was the 2 years in a row.
Was it the follow? I thought Triple H was in between.
No,
Am I wrong on that?
because I think it was Shawn 2 years in a row, and then it was Triple H 2 years in a row afterwards.
Oh yeah, so Triple H tried to pick up where Shawn left off.
Yeah,
After Shawn retired, that makes a bit of sense actually.
yeah, which never needed to happen. You know what I mean?
No,
I thought if you think about it, we had 3 matches of Triple H and Undertaker at WrestleMania because they wrestled at 17 or 18? I think it was 17. They wrestled.
17.
They had the street fight type thing, and then they obviously had the 2 back-to-back matches. But I will say, in the Hell in a Cell where Shawn was the special guest referee, that was the closest that was when I first thought the streak was ended.
Yeah.
That moment
how
when
annoying would it have been though? Because that would have been
if it was
getting
Triple H
over, really, wouldn't it?
I know, but that moment when it was super kick and everything, and it was oh my god, they've screwed Undertaker at WrestleMania. I actually thought, oh my god.
It would have cemented Shawn as an absolute asshole, wouldn't it? He
I know.
actually screwed Brett, and then storyline screwed Undertaker. People would have just been so fucking livid.
Yeah. But no.
Madness. But yeah, I mean, I say that would have been my personal choice, and it wouldn't have really done much for careers going forward. But that's how I would have done it.
Yeah, I think for me, so I'm struggling to name just one name because I think it would work equally well for both of these, right? And technically, one of them already has. So I've got 2 names, and they are Drew McIntyre or Roman Reigns. Now you may be saying, well, Roman Reigns already beat Undertaker at WrestleMania. The problem is Roman Reigns beat Undertaker at WrestleMania as the face Roman Reigns that the fans hate. Imagine Tribal Chief beating the Undertaker at WrestleMania. That's the Roman Reigns you want to be beaten.
The one whose gimmick is acknowledge me, and that's like it could just buy him part of it, couldn't it? Like he's ended the streak as well. He's unstoppable. Acknowledge him.
Yeah, like if they would have gone that way with Roman, where he'd already started to be built up as this heel who hadn't been beaten over a year, and he was the champion and stuff like that, and then we had Undertaker. That becomes like, oh my god, are they going to give Undertaker? Because imagine the intrigue of that. You've got Roman Reigns, who's undefeated, who's the Universal Champion for fucking 300 and whatever days, and then Undertaker challenges him for one last title. Straight away, you'd be thinking, shit, surely the Undertaker streak can't be over. You know, like they're never going to let him lose the streak. But then on the other hand, you're like, well, why would Undertaker have to? Like, you would have to watch it, and it would be built up, and like that would again really just be like, if Roman was the guy to do that at peak heel Tribal Chief type Roman, that was it. He's fucking to the moon. Like he becomes, because we were chatting about this when we were like, is Roman Reigns S tier status?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
and I basically said, yeah, he is just, and I think you were still a bit on the fence, and I think
I didn't because we initially did our ratings individually and then come together to decide, and I initially had Roman slightly lower. Only slightly, but I didn't have him as an S tier, and you won that argument because you made a very valid point about him.
Yeah, I think if you did something like this with Roman, where he beat the Undertaker, then there's no argument. The argument's gone. Yeah, like he's S tier at that point. So for me, something like that with Roman Reigns, and that then sets him up for the next however many years as the top dog. So that could have worked as a heel standpoint. So the reason why I picked two names is because I think if the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns would have gone up against the Undertaker now, then that would be fucking absolutely brilliant. Heel versus face, heel wins, fans hate him. He's a complete legend. The reverse to that is you get someone like Drew McIntyre, who is the baby face, really, and that's where you'd have to do that passing of the torch and the sign of respect and stuff. He's believable. You know, he's battered Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania and stuff like that. He's got the believability factor. So for me, it would have been a passing of the sword, if you will. So that one I could definitely have seen working.
That would have been a great way to cement his run for Drew.
I think it would have had the shock factor of Brock, if not even more so. I think the fans may have started to boo a little bit or whatever, but if it would have been ended with a show of respect between the two and Undertaker's retirement, as like straight away, the fans I don't think would ever boo Drew McIntyre again, because that would be Undertaker's, seal of approval to say he's the guy that has ended the streak. Like that would have made him for life, I think.
But I stand firm on this. He should have been the only win.
Yes.
In these scenarios.
Yes.
You don't have other people win after that. That's it.
No. So in both of my scenarios, as soon as Undertaker loses, he retires, which is why it's so late as to now, where it should be like Tribal Chief, or Drew McIntyre as he is today. But
it's annoying because I don't want Undertaker win exactly in his prime with Brock, but if you did it as well, even though they ended the streak, you'd always have that argument of well, could they have beat Undertaker in his prime, which is a fun argument to have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I must admit I prefer the Drew scenario and the two you're offering there, because I think Roman was already he was already in the thingy. What's the word? In the offing to be the guy, wasn't he? And they were going to do everything they can and have done everything they can to make that happen. I think Drew's face run, I don't know, I think the story just tells a lot better.
Yeah.
Or I think we can all be grateful that it was not Shane McMahon though.
He is the best in the world, so
you know the fact that he made himself win and become the best in the world and then never do anything with it or actually wrestle ever again, and leave the company was it just worries you. Like the minute he's involved in a match with the Undertaker, I'm like, oh shit, they're not gonna win, are they? Oh god.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a slight digression. I just remembered. Do you remember that when Undertaker was like, Vince asked me to beat you up, so I'm gonna beat you up. Like that was the whole point of the story between him and Shane. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Anyway, it is what it is.
Anyway,
So we can all agree then. Shawn Michaels should have done it.
No, he should not. Not unless it was a couple of years later and they both retired. Then no.
That would have been the perfect way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, really. I think with this, I guess nothing majorly would have changed in these scenarios because I think in our
this
the way
is the
we've
trouble. Like, it's a difficult what if because, like, it would propel some careers. I think the biggest sort of what if you probably got would have been the Punk thing because Punk kind of left under a cloud and that might have been affected. But the domino effect for this would have been, it would have just helped cement careers, and so it's difficult to form a what if around it. But still an excellent talking point. But it sort of, I don't know, it ends a lot quicker, doesn't it? In terms of like, what if Drew would have done it? Well, Drew would have gone on to be champion and, like you say, probably never been booed again because he got that seal of approval from Taker. Probably still would be in the position he's in. Well, not necessarily with Corbin and Riddick, like, but maybe we would have avoided that. That's a good what if. That never happened.
Yeah. It's the best kind of what if. But no, I think it kind of goes to show that I think in an ideal world, he never would have lost the streak, or if he was, it was going to be in his final match, and it was to put somebody over, either to cement them as a legend in the likes of Shawn Michaels, or to cement them as the guy in the likes of Drew or Roman. Honestly,
in the right way, I feel like the best impact the legacy could ever have is to cement a new star. So, and in a way, like you say, I think it kind of cemented Brock as that guy. So it did have that positive effect, but I don't know. Personally, and as much as my choice would have been Shawn, I think personally the best impact it could have had would have been the likes of Drew or Roman, executed correctly, obviously.
Definitely.
Yeah. But Carl, what about our listeners? What would their choice have been?
It's a great question. Why don't you let us know in the comments?
In the comments section.
Make sure to like and subscribe. No, we kid. But no, like, obviously, if you're on YouTube watching this, let us know your thoughts. If you're listening to this or whatever, head over to Instagram, drop a comment on there. I'm sure I'll be posting something about this tomorrow or something.
Head over to Spotify or Apple, where you can now leave reviews. Put a 1-word review and a 1-star. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So yeah, another fun one. To be fair, I think obviously this what if was chosen by you guys, so this is the third one we've done. What were the other two? We did the Montreal Screwjob, and we did the curtain call, didn't we?
We did the curtain call, which led to the Montreal Screwjob. Crazy stuff.
And now we got the streak. So obviously, let us know as well. What other scenarios do you think could have drastically altered the course of wrestling, or
the landscape of wrestling history? That's what we want to talk about.
That's what we want to talk about. So yeah, let us know. Give us some ideas. Give us some inspiration. But until next time, make sure as well you check us out on PWTs. I haven't actually got a PWTs logo on this graphic. What am I thinking? And they're on all the rest.
But we are on PWTs.
We are. So go and check us out there. But yeah, and follow us on all the socials, and yeah, listen to us, watch us, and enjoy us. That's the main thing.
All of that.
All of the things. And so until next week, we will bid you a farewell. Thank you again for watching or listening, and yeah, we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, it's Georgia Smith here, and you've heard me on A2theK. These guys are awesome. Check it out. A2theK.
A2theK.